I know this is going to sound lame, but when I hear crop report, I think back to Trading Places where Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd gamed the frozen orange juice market. It's not quite like that, but people were taken by surprise by the latest forecasts.
Well, it could be more than like that than you might think. You know, those guys could pretty much inspired a generation of Chicago traders to go into the business. And the game of trying to game the WASDE, the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report, remains alive and well. Fortunately, the USDA has some pretty strong security on that, so the markets can still be genuinely surprised at things like today's corn prices. You saw world inventories go down more than analysts were expecting, and that pushed corn prices to their highest in more than a year. This is a sign that the market is tightening a bit. The crop estimate was also reduced a bit as acreage has gone down. The USDA had a report on that last week. And so you're kind of seeing these markets, which had been bearish for a while, coming back into alignment.
Okay, so there was the supply issue there, but there is also demand, and that's a big part of the story as well, isn't it?
It is. The U.S. has had stronger exports, and part of that is actually tied to then what was going on in wheat. We saw an estimate for wheat where the inventories for wheat predicted in 2016 were higher than any of the analysts that Bloomberg surveyed. Part of the reason for that is because corn was becoming relatively cheaper for wheat in China. So farmers are starting to feed corn to their livestock instead of wheat. That pushes up the price of corn, creates demand for corn exports from places like the U.S., helps drive wheat inventories up, and thus those prices are down a little bit today.
So what does that mean for food prices if wheat prices are going to go down because inventories are going to be much bigger than earlier forecasts?
Well, I mean, you'll already see it in grocery stores. I was amazed a couple weeks ago at the price of macaroni and cheese I saw over at the store. And you see that reverberate through other products. The more that a product is based on a raw material like bread, like macaroni, high wheat inventories are going to be a moderating effect on food prices. Corn, not as much of a difference, although you will see that show up in meat prices since so much of corn goes into animal feed. Ethanol demand is up as well as summer driving season kicks in. That's something that's also supporting the price of that crop.
Certainly, of course. I also want to get into El Nino because we've been hearing that it's going to be a big factor this year. To what extent was that acknowledged? Was that folded into the crop report?
You know, you're not seeing that show up in the crop reports quite so much, in the sense that people are expecting the biggest impacts of El Nino later. However, we certainly are seeing a lot of wetness in the Midwest, and that is starting to affect soybean inventories. You saw movements in soybean prices as well because a lot of the crop is just wet.